Hello and welcome back to Deck Doctor episode 2, and we're going to go back to the familiar when it comes to this episode. We're going to take a look at Green-Red Crackthorn. Now, Green-Red Crackthorn didn't see much play on the build-up through the Oversky Islands, but I've been playing this a lot recently, and it is performing so well. It's very consistent, does what it says on the tin, and still a very powerful deck. Now, as you can see from the list, not much has changed really. We see the inclusion of Crystal Flower, but other than that, no other Oversky cards. Now, we do have access to the Emerald Salamander, but I personally don't rate the card myself. Perhaps there are some builds that you guys have tried with Crackthorn that includes the Emerald Salamander. Be sure to link them below if you do. But this is the list I've been using, and I've been climbing to God rank. I climbed to God rank with this. I also got to top 10 God with this, and I also climbed from rank 25 to rank 5 on another account with this list as well. So I've done a lot of playing, a lot of climbing with Crackthorn, and sometimes it's good to have kind of an old tried and tested deck even when an expansion comes out, because you'll be comfortable to know that it'll perform, it hasn't changed much, and you can climb that ladder. So let's get into the cards and go over them and see how they perform in this list. To start things off, we have our early Faeria Collectors. Axe Grinder is a fantastic turn 1 play. It's a 4/3, can collect Faeria for you straight from turn 2. And then when you get into the mid game, you still have a 5/4 creature if you summon it on an opponent's well. So one of your priorities will be getting that mountain on your opponent's well, just so your Axe Grinders are far more dangerous. Now, Sagami Warrior is a better turn 1 collector, simply because it dodges a lot of popular removal. You can play this on turn 1 regardless if you go first or second, and it has 4 life, so it's going to take some extra removal from your opponent in order to clear it. Firebomb answers this, and Choking Sands answers this, but it's 4 Faeria for 3 Faeria, so it's a good trade-off for you. But if they want to use, say, Soul Drains or Wind Soldiers, they're going to have to use a combination of removal to clear it. And as a 3/4, you know, it has a good stat line, it can challenge a lot of creatures. And with other cards in the deck, like Ground Shaker, it can kill Wood Elementals. And with Elderwood Embrace, it goes up to 5 attack and can challenge underground bosses. So very good card, and I'm glad to see it make its return in Crackthorn. Last but not least, we have the Wood Elemental, the best turn 2 play of the deck. You can play this with Explore on, sorry, not turn 2, second turn. Correct myself there. So the best second turn play in the deck. So you can play Explore, you can then play a forest, and then you can play Wood Elemental. This accelerates your land, but also gives you that creature as well. And I actually did a card spotlight on Wood Elemental, so if you'd like to find out more about that, check that video out on this YouTube channel. But yeah, Wood Elemental, Taunt as well is going to help you against the rush decks, but mainly its purpose is to accelerate that land so you can get your Crackthorns out earlier. Our next selection of cards are some of the more bulkier creatures. Cypher Blood Tyrant makes a return to competitive Faeria, which is really nice because Cypher Blood Tyrant is nuts if it can snowball out of control. There's still some good checks for Cypher right now. We have Crystal Flower, Azura Skywhale, so there are ways to keep him in check. But this card does have to be respected. If your opponent doesn't have access to those tools, they're going to have to either move around it or try and clear it inefficiently. And Cypher the Blood Tyrant is also really good with Elderwood Embrace because it allows you to extend its reach and clear much bigger creatures. Ground Shaker is not so much a mid-game creature. You can play this in the early game, but it's just a really solid creature. We see this card time and time again cropping up in red decks, and nothing has changed since Oversky. It's still a 5/6 for 6 Faeria that deals 1 damage to all enemies, so this allows stuff like the Sagami Warrior and the Wood Elemental to clear other creatures of 4 life in combination with the Ground Shaker. But it's also quite bulky itself, so it's going to take some resources from your opponent in order to clear it. Last but not least, we have the king of the deck, Crackthorn Beast. Not much has changed with this either. Dash 2, gift, deal 4 damage randomly split, give +4/+4 randomly split as well. This card can create incredible momentum. So you want to be able to play this and clear your opponent's board, or you want to dash it into an aggressive position where your opponent can't answer it. So still a very, very strong card, and you'll find lots of use for this, and it will snowball out of control if the gift hits the right target. So fantastic card, and still brings together green-red as an archetype. Green-red Crackthorn has always been known for its vast amount removal, with the Crackthorn, with the Ground Shakers, but also with the red event cards. Cypher's Wrath and Flame Burst are great removal options. They're going to allow you to clear out threats, trade up the curve in combination, and just deal with any problems that show up. Flame Burst is great for pushing damage if you're trying to get a quick lethal, and Cypher's Wrath also deals damage to your opponent, just making the loss inevitable if you have initiative. Now, Crystal Flower is the new addition to this list. It is a structure. Gift swallow a creature, so it absorbs a creature, and then at the end of the turn deal 1 damage to the structure. When the structure gets destroyed, it releases the creature. And this is basically Crackthorn's answer to anything that's too big for it to handle. Now, back before the Oversky, one of the problems Crackthorn had was big creatures. So Mono Green did very well against Crackthorn simply because the creatures were usually a bit too big for the Crackthorn decks to handle, but now Crystal Flower lets you keep in check anything that you can't manage, so very powerful inclusion into the Crackthorn archetype. Our last selection of cards is a bit of utility. Silent Horsemaster is the deck's mobility card. We don't use Grove Caller anymore because this list is a lot faster than traditional Crackthorns from before the Oversky. If you look at some of the Crackthorn lists before the Oversky, they had stuff like Firestorm, Garadan, Sagami Grovecaller, but now we need to make room for Crystal Flowers. So this is a much faster list. You're trying to win the game by turn 7, turn 8 if you can, and trying to apply a lot of pressure. And Silent Horsemaster is very good at doing this. Not only can you play it as a turn 1 Harvester, but you can also send a creature up the board to apply more pressure, or to clear a defending creature. Elderwood Embrace makes its return. I haven't used this card in a while, but it's been very, very strong in Crackthorn. Basically just turning these smaller creatures in the deck into real powerhouses that can challenge a lot of creatures in Faeria. And in combination with removal, you can take out pretty much anything. So Elderwood Embrace very strong. And of course it's very strong with Cypher as well, allowing him to munch and devour any creatures that stand in his way. Alright, now we've taken a look at the deck, let's take a look at the Mulligan. So Sagami Warrior and Axe Grinder are great cards if you go in first. You get to set up a turn 1 collector, and you can start gathering Faeria and resources to apply pressure. But if you go in second, Wood Elemental is the best choice. You get to accelerate land, develop a Taunter, a very durable Taunter, and collect Faeria all in one. So Wood Elemental if you go in second, Sagami Warrior and Axe Grinder if you go in first. Now, if you do get Wood Elemental and you go in second, I wouldn't mind keeping Axe Grinder as well, because you're going to be able to accelerate your lands so close to your opponent's well, you'll be able to develop that aggressive mountain and get that aggressive Axe Grinder down. Now, if you have either of these in your opening hand, you can choose some other cards to go with them. Silent Horsemaster is, again, a good turn 1 collector if you don't have any of the first 3 I talked about, but also you can use it as mobility to take care of your opponent's collectors. Elderwood Embrace is a great card to empower your creatures to make sure you can fight for the wells, but it also can be very good against red decks to make sure they can't use removal to get rid of your harvesters. Last but not least, Ground Shaker's not a bad keep either. It's just that kind of early game big body you can get down that can cause some trouble, and then you can combo it with removal as well if you need to clear some threats. And Ground Shaker, if you don't have any of these opening creatures that I talked about, if you do have the Ground Shaker, it might just be worth keeping just in case you don't mulligan into a turn 1 harvester, and then you can just play Ground Shaker turn 2. So that is an option as well. So very straightforward mulligan, find a turn 1 harvester, then just find some utility as well to go along with it. So how much does this list cost? It has 11 commons, 9 rares, 9 epics and 1 legendary, coming up to a total cost of 1,035 Memoria. Now keep in mind, crystal flowers come for free. If you play the first island of the Oversky, you can get a playset of crystal flowers for free, so you don't have to pay for those. And to be honest, if you want to make this deck a bit cheaper, if you drop the Cypher and add a Horsemaster, you knock off 320 Memoria off the total cost, so you can build this deck quite cheaply. And it does have a lot of epics. I think they should be your priority when crafting. Groundshaker should be your #1 priority, and then you can get the rest of the cards you need. But overall, I think it's a pretty cheap deck, and it's very, very effective, very simple and straightforward to play. So if you're looking for a deck to get started in Faeria, you've played through some of the solo content, got a bit of Memoria, I'd strongly recommend this list because it's strong. Like I said, it's linear, you're doing the same thing every time, and it's very consistent. Let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses. I already talked about this in the Memoria part, but consistent and linear game plan. This is really important when you're climbing a ladder because you want to be able to get wins at basically the same way every time. You don't want to think too much about how you're going to win the game. This deck is great because it does the same thing every time. You build up the one side, you fight for the wells, and then you eventually push and finish off with the Crackthorn. So if you're going to do that every match, you'll be climbing the ladder very easily. Great board control with removal. So we have the Cypher's Wrath, we have the Flame Burst, we also have the Crystal Flower now, so we can take care of threats that Crackthorn can't handle. So this deck is a lot faster than the old list. We don't have Garadan, we don't have Firestorm, so AoE can be a bit weak, but you're applying a lot of pressure very early, so you shouldn't need those cards to get back into a match. Creates a lot of momentum with cheap creatures and removal, and that's why I really love this version. The momentum you can create is insane because you just play all these cheap creatures, use your removal and your power-ups to make sure you kill the more expensive creatures from your opponent, and then eventually you just overwhelm your opponent and they can't do anything about it. So I love the momentum this deck creates, and it's very good at keeping initiative. Crackthorn can be hit or miss, so this is kind of the nature of the card. It can have the most amazing damage pings and the most amazing power-ups and you just win the game, or you're going to need Crackthorn to try and come back and then it completely whiffs, misses everything, and doesn't power up the right creatures and you lose. So hit or miss, but most times Crackthorn will work in your favor. This is a card that kind of helps you win more if you're ahead. So Crackthorn is great when you're ahead, but when you're behind, Crackthorn is probably at its worst because you're relying on a bit of variance to get you back into a match. Weak against high life creatures. Now, Crystal Flower does help with this, but if you're playing against, say, mono green, they have too many high life creatures for you to handle, and now with the Tree of Everlife, big bulky creatures are very, very hard to deal with. So still the same weakness for Crackthorn, a little easier with the Crystal Flower, but again, mono green especially will be a big problem. Before we wrap things up, let's talk about land placement. Very simple with Crackthorn. You want your starting land to be whatever starting creature you have. So if you have, say, Sagami Warrior or a Wood Elemental, you play a forest. If you have an Axe Grinder, you play a mountain. You probably want to keep your forests closer to your side of the board, because we don't have Grove Caller, so it doesn't really make any difference where our forests are aggressively. And Sagami Warrior has dash, so you can dash into aggressive positions if you need to. Mountains are far more important in aggressive positions because you want your ground shakers and your axe grinders and your Cypher to be able to apply pressure. So if you can line it up, have your forests lower and your mountains much higher on the board. But ultimately, all you're trying to do is build 6 special lands. Make sure you get an aggressive mountain for that axe grinder spot, and then you can apply pressure. So very simple land development game plan to go with its very linear deck game plan. So it all comes together very nicely when it comes to Crackthorn. That wraps up this episode of Oversky Deck Doctor. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know you've probably seen Crackthorn a lot in the past, But I figured I'd give you guys a new list to play with if you do miss Crackthorn. I'm a big fan of the deck. I like it because it kind of does what it says on the tin, and that's the type of decks I enjoy. But this is very consistent, it's very easy to pilot, and it will get you up that ladder. You know, I've done it myself, you know, it's tried and tested. So yeah, give this deck a shot if you're looking to climb, and if you just want something that's pretty familiar and hasn't had too much influence from the Oversky. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, drop a subscribe to keep up to date of when our content goes live. If you'd like to learn more about Wood Elemental, we have Card Spotlight this week, which covers Wood Elemental, why it's so powerful. It also has some matches with my mono green Tree of Everlife, so if you want to give that list a go, be sure to check out that video. We also have Deck Pilot coming up for this episode of Deck Doctor, so be sure to check that out if you'd like to see how this deck is played. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great time playing this deck and enjoy Green Red Crackthorn.